So, Paper Mario.
Okie dokie.
After the release of the series' second outing, The Thousand Year Door on the GameCube, it has managed to stand the test of time with one of the most iconic aesthetics in the history of gaming. The flat, layered 2D characters against the stylized and cel-shaded 3D environments still look great after nearly 20 years and several generations of graphical evolution, inspiring and influencing generations of artists and aspiring game developers even now. With that in mind, people recreating the Paper Mario art and even animation style is nothing new, and if anything, has popped up a lot more as we look back on games like The Thousand Year Door in recent years, from fan art and even indie games that try to recreate that style, such as Bug Fables. I've recently figured it out, and I've been trying to do it myself. If you've been wanting to try it out and learn, maybe for fun, personal projects, or even your own Paper Mario inspired game, here's a short guide based on my own experience to get you started. Okay, before you start, you're going to need a few things. Mainly your preferred art software, bonus if it supports vector, and motion graphics software. When it comes to references for making Paper Mario styled characters, it's also a good idea to keep the section on Thousand Year Door sprites on the Spriters resource handy. For this guide, I'll be using Adobe Illustrator and Adobe After Effects, with a little bit of Quip Studio Paint on the side, more on that later. Now that you have everything prepped, what do you make? You put together your own character, Mario himself, one of the partners, enemies? After some thinking, I pinpointed the perfect place to get started, learning the ins and outs while staying easy to follow for anybody. Toad. Please don't click off the video, but seriously, Toad is a good place to start for making Paper Mario styled characters, and is going to be the subject in this guide. They consist of very few parts, all of which are low in detail, easy to put together, and simple to animate. But they still include many of the design tropes that you'll see across the whole cast, and not to mention that it looks pretty impressive in the end for your first go. With all that said, we should now be ready to get started. When making your own characters, I recommend sketching them out. Here's one I did in Clip Studio Paint for Friends OC. It may look a bit messy, but sketching out every piece and either making them in different colors or placing them in different layers can give you a good idea of how many pieces you'll need to make, where to put them when animating, and how to proportion them. The end result may end up different, especially when rendering them and thinking about how they'll work when being animated, but it's a good starting point. However, since this guide is entirely for learning, I suggest tracing each of Toad's parts off the sprite sheet. Make them all as separate pieces if you can. In Illustrator, you can do this by having each one on a different artboard. I did mention I'll be using Illustrator for this guide, and that it's a bonus if the art software you're choosing is vector-based or supports it. This is so that you can get the most consistent and clean line work possible to really stay true to the style. But if you have a steady hand, drawing the pieces yourself is a perfectly viable option. The outlines should be thick, but not bold, and the lines for elements inside, such as the point on Toad's body where the pants and chest separate and Toad's smile, should be a few points smaller. For me in Illustrator, I use strokes between 5 and 7 points for the outlines, with the inner lines or smaller elements like the vest between a point or two smaller. Once you have all that covered, just fill them with color and adjust how the pieces are layered if needed. And there, that's the hard part over. Okay, now it's time to get this ready to color. In Illustrator, start by copying or backing up all the pieces in case something goes wrong, and put them to the side. Now with your pieces on hand, select everything and expand the objects with stroke and object selected, and ungroup as many times as needed. Now the inner color and the outline are separate pieces, with the outline also now being an object, so you don't accidentally mess it up and still keep their line weights when you increase the size of the pieces. Color the inner shapes, the outlines being much darker shades of the respective color. You can keep them black, but it's entirely up to you. Use adjusted circles and cut them slightly to put the spots on Toad's hat. Adjust the layering and placement of all the objects if needed. Now, a defining feature of Paper Mario's style when it comes to color is the inner shape where the shading is in place. Now to do this, we're going to copy the colored piece that you separated from the shape's outline, put it in front, make it a different color needed, and wait, what are you doing? What are you doing? A possible beginner's mistake when it comes to making the inner gradient in Illustrator is simply shrinking a copy of the inner shape or trying to draw a new shape inside and lining it up. Don't do this. Not only will it look bad and inconsistent, but the latter will end up wasting time. Try this instead. Copy the separated shape, paste it in front, change the color and switch it to an outline, and make the outline about 10 or 15 points wide, depending on what works best for you. Expand that into an object, select the direct selection tool, click a point on the outside, and start deleting. Now a new shape should be on the inside. This works for any shape and will always have the same result. If a new shape doesn't show up on the inside, that means you did something wrong and should probably start over. Didn't get that? Here's a diagram. Pause this video and screenshot it if you want. Alright, now we're going to start shading. To stay accurate, we won't be shading the right arm and part of the vest along with Toad's chest, so delete or chop those off. Click the inner shape and start with the gradient tool and select the radial gradient. One color in the gradient should be the base color and the other color should be a shade. Pinch, pull, and adjust the circle shape in the slider until you get a good looking result. Looking at the characters and sprite's resource as reference should give you a good idea on what you should be aiming for if you don't know how to approach a shape. But what do you do in the case of something like Toad's hat, which has objects of other colors inside? Lower the opacity of the base color greatly, about 20-30%. Lower the opacity of the other color too, but not as much. And just in case, just lower the opacity of the shape itself a little bit. Now put it in front of all the shapes on that piece. Readjust the layering on all the pieces if needed, and export all of them as separate, transparent PNGs, and organize them into a folder if you can. Now we can get to animating. Okay, provided the sheer idea of running more than one piece of Adobe software today hasn't made your computer explode, we can open up After Effects or any other motion graphics software that works for you and begin setting up your parts for animating. Open a new project, a new composition, keep it on the default settings, and set a resolution of around 1280 by 960. Now that that's open, take the pieces you put in the folder and drag them in. If the pieces are too big or too small, select all of them, press S, and scale them down to a more manageable size. Oh, by the way, it's a good idea to save your project file in the same folder that you have placed your pieces, but prevent your project from getting messed up due to missing assets if the project files and pieces end up getting shuffled around in your system, and have your project look like it needs to install Counter-Strike Source when you open it up again. Also, before you arrange the pieces, you'll quickly want to change the anchor points on the feet, arms, and head. If you don't know what an anchor point is, it's the point where an object will scale and rotate around. It only takes a few clicks and will probably save you a lot of trouble when animating. Just double click on the asset, where it will be taken to a dedicated window for it, move the control point, and go back to the original composition. For the feet, you'll want to place them where the toe is intended to be. For the arms, at the very top, and for the head, around where the neck is. Now just move the pieces around until they look right. Okay, now we're ready. To finish off this guide, we're going to be doing a simple looping idle animation, about a second long. Paper Mario's idle animations usually consist of the characters bobbing up and down, with a slow rise and a quick fall. To recreate this, we're going to need 3 keyframes on all of the pieces, one at the start, one at the end, and another just slightly before it. The first and last keyframe should be the position that you currently have the pieces in, and the middle keyframe will be the peak of the movement. On the middle keyframe, select the arms, head, and body, and move them slightly upward and to the left. This will end up changing the position values. On the feet, you're going to want to select both and press R, which will bring up the rotation values. You'll want to raise it slightly so that the heels of the feet rise alongside the body. On the arms, you'll want to do the same on each one so they rise a bit. If you want both arms to have equal degrees of rotation, give both the same number value in the right box, but put a dash next to one of them. The last thing we're going to do is select every keyframe and apply Easy Ease, and drag this bar here, which determines the length of the animation, and put it on the middle of the last keyframe. This is so that the animation can be in a perfect loop and not have an awkward pause as everything returns to its original position. Press the spacebar to check your work. Once you're satisfied, go to the render menu and export it as a video file. And with that, you're done! Now you know the basics to creating and animating your own Paper Mario styled characters. There is, of course, more to learn, such as the different varieties of animations, not to mention building and working with more complex characters, but for now you've learned just about all the basics and essentials you'll need to go forward. If this has been helpful, feel free to share this video around, or post the code you've made alongside this guide on Twitter or Instagram and show me. Thank you for watching and stick around for more.